is Wednesday, April 13th, 2022, and we are on Daf Lamed Zayin in Yevamot, and we are about, let me share my screen. We are about 8 lines up on the bottom of Lamed Vav Amabet. And yesterday we learned a debate regarding a man who has married someone who is pregnant or nursing. So we have Rebbe Meir's position is that not only does he need to separate from such a woman, and again, the reason to separate from the pregnancy is because, well, basically these are both rabbinic strictures. And the idea is that we don't want to have the woman end up stopping nursing for the child at too young an age that would actually create risk for the infant. And so Rabbi Meir says not only does the person is the person not allowed to actually continue to live with her, he needs to divorce her and to take her out and never remarry. So they have to get divorced permanently. The Chachamim said, no, that's not true. He does need to separate from her. He does need to take her out, but he can take her back at an appropriate time, meaning after she's finished nursing. Now, we explained that the Chachamim said at the very end of yesterday, we said that the Chachamim say take her out. It means that he must give her a get. So the question that we were left with yesterday is, well, what happens if the poor fellow here is a Kohen? Is he stuck? So we're going to begin with a discussion of a similar case, and that will lead us to effectively resolving. We're going to try and say that the similar case should apply here. Then we'll provide an explanation for why the law might be different. And that will be the end of the discussion. And so in the end, we will see shortly that if it's a Kohen who does this, that effectively he is up a creek without a paddle, that he will need to separate and by definition will not be able to remarry because he has to give his wife a get. And a Kohen is not allowed, unlike a Yisrael or a Levi, who's allowed to marry a woman that he divorces, as long as she hasn't married someone else in the interim. That is not the case with respect to a Kohen, and so as a result, he will not be able to marry her. So a very big, important warning for any Kohen that he's not supposed to marry somebody who is pregnant or nursing. Okay, so let's take a look. Again, we're 8 lines up, and we're teaching a brisa that's going to now give us an analogy to the case of a Kohen. So Amar le Rav Ashi le Rav Hoshaya Berei de Rav Idi. So Hasam Tanan. So we learned another brisa. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer Kol Sheshaha Ba'Adam Shloshim Yom Eino Nefel. That any child who survives for 30 days is not considered a nefel, a non-viable child. It's not considered an aborted child. What does that imply? Halo shaha sveikahavi. If it did not survive for that long, well, then we're dealing with an uncertainty. And Tosos helps clarify that what we're talking about here is where the child died not due to normal circumstances. So God forbid, the child was in an accident. So as a result, you don't know whether or not the child was going to survive for 30 days. If nothing happened, but then, and so as a result, there's an uncertainty associated with it. Of course, if the child dies of natural causes, essentially of something that we don't know why and, we don't understand, then in fact, that is the definition of a non-viable child, is a child that would die within 30 days. So if a child survives for 30 days, so then it is no longer a nafil, no longer a non-viable child. But if it does not, and again, if the death is caused by some external factor that is not about the health of the child, well, then we're going to be uncertain. The itmar And so therefore it was said about this case, Meis b'toch shloshim yom, if the infant dies within 30 days, v'amda v'niskadsha, and the mother had already married herself. So Ravrina Mishmei de Rava Amar Im Eshes Yisrael He Choletzes. So in a situation where the original father was a brother and had no other children. So as a result, now the question, if the child was an only child of a deceased father and the mother married someone who was not the father's brother, so then we say that we have to perform chalitza, that in order and then she can stay married. But because right now we're not sure whether or not that child that died within 30 days is considered a child, and therefore we're not sure whether or not she's allowed to marry someone else. So we'll say that she should perform chalitza with one of the brothers, and that way she can then stay married, to the person that she's marrying now. However, if she marries a Kohen, i.e., not the one, not the brother, we're not talking about where Reuven is a Kohen, but where the stam person off the street that she marries is a Kohen. So she had been married to Reuven, was pregnant when Reuven died, and then ends up having the child marries a Kohen, and then the child dies within 30 days. Maybe she even marries the Kohen, within, shortly after giving birth. So in that situation, because we're going to assume that the child would have been a viable child, we'll say that she does not need to undergo chalitza, because if she did undergo chalitza, right, then she would not be able to stay married to that Kohen, because a woman who is a chalutza, somebody who had chalitza done with her, is like a divorcee, and a Kohen can't marry a divorcee. So we're going to, and so we say a Kohen can therefore not marry a chalutza, a woman to whom chalitza has been done. And so as a result, we're going to, in order to avoid that problem, we're going to just assume that the child would have been viable and will be okay. And so therefore she's allowed to marry the Kohen. Rav Masharshia Mishmei de Rava Amar Achadzo v'achadzo choletzes. Rav Masharshia says no, both of the people need to have chalitza, even if it's a Kohen, and it's tough luck on the Kohen. Yeah, it means that she's not going to be able to stay married to her, but that's tough luck. Because maybe the child was not a viable child, meaning maybe this woman requires chalitza, and so we're going to have to do chalitza because we're not sure. So Amar le Ravina Rav Masharshia. Ravina says to Rav Masharshia. Now we turn to Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph. The Orsa Amar Rava Hachi. No, you're missing something out. Yes, because both Rav Masharshia and Ravina said their statements in the name of Rava, and so Ravina is explaining that to Rav Masharshia that Rava said that what you just said, that even the Kohen requires chalitza, even the wife of the Kohen would require chalitza, but in the morning he retracted it and decided that no, in fact, it would be if she has already accepted kedushin from a Kohen, so then she does not need to undergo chalitza. So Amar le Sharisu Yehei Rava Desistru Aftarba. If you're going to if you're permitting her to marry without chalitza, well then you're going to end up permitting even things that are forbidden, even forbidden fats of different animals. And so as a result, he's saying, that is too lenient a position, and it will lead to other leniencies that are inappropriate. So well, now let's go back. So we just had this discussion and this argument between Ravina and Rav Masharshia, and now let's take all of this information back to our case of a Kohen who married a pregnant woman or a nursing woman. So what's the halacha? Mi avad rabbanan takanta lekohen olo. Did the rabbis, again, according to Rava, according to Ravina, so we have a fix for the Kohen, because the Kohen, we in the case that we were talking about, of the child that doesn't survive for 30 days, we said that we'll allow the Kohen to remain married and we won't require chalitza. So that's a fix for the Kohen. Well, what about here? Do we say that there's a fix? So Amar Le, so that was Rav Ashi says back to, so he said, so Rav Hoshaya said back to Rav Ashi, Hachi Hashta, these cases are not comparable. So Bishlam Hasam over there in the case of the baby that died within 30 days, Kavan de Ika Rabbanan de Pligi Ale de Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, since there are rabbis who argue with Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, de Amri Afal Gap de Lo Shaha Vlad Ma'al Yahavi, because they say that even though the child did not live for 30 days, it's considered a child that was viable. So Gabi Ashes Kohen, Kavan Delo Efshar Avdin and Karabanan. So as a result, even though we might otherwise have paskin like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, we'll hold like the rabbis who say that even a child that dies within 30 days, we can consider that infant a viable child. And so as a result, that's why the woman doesn't require chalitza. But here, in the case of a Kohen who marries a woman who is pregnant or is nursing, we don't have anyone on whom to rely. Because Ika Rebbe Meir, you want to say that it's not like it's like Rebbe Meir. Well, Ha Amar Yotzi V'lo Yachzor Olamis. He says that the woman needs to be divorced and can never be taken back. The Ika Rabbanan, and if you want to say it's like the rabbis, Ha Amar Beget. They say that he needs to discharge her with a bill of divorce, so with a get. So as a result, the bottom line is that they are required to divorce, and even if it's a Kohen, it's tough luck. It just means that Rebbe Meir effectively is the halacha for any Kohen, meaning that the Kohen has to divorce if he marries somebody who's pregnant or is nursing, he's going to need to divorce her and will not be allowed to remarry her. So Itmar. So now we now turn to a new case. So in this case, we're going to talk about is we have Rachel was divorced or widowed by her husband Ruvain, and then Chaim performs kedushin with Rachel and runs away. Chaim is not in this case Ruvain's brother. We'll just Chaim some guy on the street, and let's see what happens. So Itmar. So kidsha betoch shlosha uvara. If somebody marries a woman, I should say, does kedushin with a woman. So this is the first step of marriage, and then he runs away, meaning he separates from her, so that there's no chance of consummating the marriage. So pligi ba Rav Acha v'Rav Ram. Rav Acha and Rav Ram argue about the situation. Chadamar b'sham tinan lei. One says that we put a ban on him and we say that he has to divorce her. The Chadamar iruke mistaye. That no, the fact that he removed himself from her, the fact that he ran away, that is sufficient. Because obviously it means that he understands that he's not allowed to engage in sexual relations with her, and so as a result, we don't need to force them to actually get divorced. They can just wait to get married the rest of the marriage after she is done with the nursing. So Hava Uvda, there was in fact a case like this, and Hava Uvda and Rafram. There was a case like this, and Rafram, and what did Rafram say? Eruke mistaye, that the running away is sufficient. And so as a result, it seems like we're going to say that in fact if the husband runs away and only does kedushin, well, then we won't force the divorce in that situation. So this effectively now has given us a fix for the Kohen. The Kohen who wants to marry a pregnant woman or a nursing woman should only do kedushin and then separate, and that way it will be okay. All right, so Suffolk ben Tish. So now we go back to our Mishnah and we deal with the following situation. We had one of the last, I think the last case in our Mishnah was a case where we were uncertain whether the child that was born was a child for Reuven, the brother who died, or a child for Chaim, the brother who performed Yibum with Rachel, because maybe Rachel had a 7-month pregnancy and maybe Rachel had a 9-month pregnancy. And so because of this uncertainty, although we know that the child is totally fine, we're going to force Chaim to divorce Rachel, because maybe the child was Reuven's, in which case Chaim's living with Rachel is living in sin, because if Reuven has a child, then the prohibition of marrying your brother's wife continues forever, and there's an absolute prohibition associated with it. It would only be if the child is Chaim's that everything would be fine. Now, for the child's perspective, at least this child, everything is okay. Because if the child belonged to Reuven, well, then the child is a valid child, and there's no sin that was created by forming the child, and so it's totally fine. He's a totally kosher yid. And now, if on the other hand the child is Chaim's, he's also a totally kosher yid, because it means that Reuven died without children, and so Chaim, the brother, is allowed to marry his brother's ex-wife. So in those situations, that first child is going to be totally fine. So that was all of that is what we said in our Mishnah. So now we're going to deal with a question regarding this our Mishnah, namely, why is it that we don't say that since most women have a pregnancy that lasts 9 months, we say that Rachel's pregnancy was 9 months, and therefore this child was really Reuven's child? That is the question. So let's take a look at it inside. So Amar le Rav Nachman lema halech achar rov nashim v'rov nashim l'tisha yaldan. Why don't we say just go after the most of women, and most women end up giving birth after 9 months? So Amar le Nashe didan l'shiva yaldan. So Rav Nachman says back, our women give birth at 7 months. Wonder whether that's because of a lack of good nutrition, but in any event, so Amar le. So 1 second, Rava says back to Rav Nachman, Nashe ditchu havu ruba da alma. Your women are the majority of the world. What is it? What are you saying? What, I don't understand your point, is what Rava is responding to Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman clarifies. So Amar le hachi kamin. This is what I'm trying to say. Rov nashim yalda l'tisha umiyat l'shiva. There is, yes, a majority of women do give birth at 9 months, but a significant minority give birth at 7 months. And every woman who gives birth at 9 months, well, that the pregnancy is noticeable by 1/3 of the pregnancy's duration, meaning at 3 months. And yet this case, because it's a case of uncertainty, it clearly means that Rachel's pregnancy was not obvious after 3 months. So as a result, Itrale Ruba. So since this woman Rachel, who we don't know whether she was pregnant for 7 months or 9 months, since she did not exhibit the typical qualities of a woman who has a 9-month pregnancy, where she would show after 3 months, Since she did not have that, we can no longer apply the majority to her. Well, one second. If we say that every woman who gives birth at 9 months is noticeable at 3 months, well then, well, in that case, doesn't that mean that Rachel is definitely a 7 month, definitely had only a 7 month pregnancy, and therefore this child is actually Chaim's child? So that doesn't work. So that we need to qualify that explanation. So Ella Ema. So no. This is what we really mean. Rov hayoladis Letitia ubara nikar l'shlishim. Most women who give birth at 9 months, their fetus is noticeable after 3 months. Well, hi, midolo hukar l'shlishim. Since this woman was not noticeable at 3 months, so itra la yeruba. So as a result, we cannot tie her to the majority. And so as a result, we essentially have a classic suffix, and we cannot just go after the majority. So Tana Rabbanan, okay, so now that we dealt with that case, so we say that this child, that first child, is a kosher child. Well, what about if there's more than one child? So what's the status of the second child? So Tana Rabbanan, let's take a look and we'll see a brisa that teaches about that. So Rishon Ra'oi Lios Kohen Gadol, the first child is totally kosher, so much so that if we were dealing with Reuven and Chaim who were Kohanim, where Reuven died and then Chaim performs Yibum Chaim performs Yibum to Rachel, and so now they have a child. And again, Chaim performed the Yibum too quickly, and we're not sure whether the pregnancy was a 9-month pregnancy from Reuven or a 7-month pregnancy from Chaim. We say the first child, not only is he kosher, but he is so kosher, he could even be the Kohen Gadol. The Sheni Mamzer Mesafek. But the second one, that one's going to be a problem because that is a suffix mamzer. Because why are they a suffix mamzer? Let's work it through. Because if in fact Reuven is Reuven is the father of the first child, well then the second child between Chaim and Rachel is a child that is born out of a kares relationship. It is a punishable offense by kares for a man to marry his brother's ex-wife, and that's exactly what Rachel is, and because it's outside the context of Yibum, and so therefore we have a real problem. And this second child, if in fact the first child is really Reuven's, well then the second child is a mamzer. On the other hand, of course, if the first child was really Chaim's, the second child is totally kosher because the second child is also Chaim's, and because the Yibum was kosher. So that leaves us with a doubt. It leaves us with an uncertainty. It all depends on whether the first child belongs to Reuven or belongs to Chaim. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, ein mamzer misafek. We say that no, he's not a mamzer from Suffolk. Now, what does that mean? Well, excellent question, because we can say two different explanations. So my kamar, we're going to now have two different explanations of this argument. Again, the literal wording is the first one says that the second child is considered a mamzer due to doubt, and Rabbi Eliezer says no, the second child is not a mamzer due to doubt. Well, what does that mean that he's yes or no on a mamzer due to doubt? So Amar Abaye Halchik Kamar. This is what we're saying. Rishon Roy Lios Kohen Gadol. Of course, that one we say already. We know that one. The first child is it could be even the Kohen Gadol. The Sheni Safek Mamzer v'Aser b'Mamzeres. That because the second child is a Safek Mamzer, that child is not allowed to even marry a Mamzeres, because a Mamzeres, a female child who's a mamzer, is a definite mamzer. But this child is not a definite mamzer. this son is only a possible mamzer. And so as a result, he's stuck. He's not able to marry a regular Jew, and he can't marry a mamzeris either. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov disagrees. Eino safek mamzer. He's not a safek mamzer. Ela vadai mamzer umuter ben mamzeris. Rather, he is considered a definite mamzer, and as a result, he's, or at least he's treated like a definite mamzer, and he's permitted to marry a mamzeres. Rava Amar Hachikamar. Rava says, no, you've missed it, Abaye. That is not the argument. Rather, the argument is the exact opposite. Rishon Roy Leos Kohen Gadol. When the Tanna Kama says the first one is able to be a Kohen Gadol, that's of course clear. V'sheni Mamzer Vadei Misafik Umuter b'Mamzeres. No, what this Tanna Kama is saying is that the second child is treated like a definite mamzer because of the doubt. Meaning, because of the doubt, we're going to treat the second child like a definite mamzer, and as a result, is permitted to marry a mamzeris. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, no, ein vadai mamzer misafik. He's not a definite mamzer out of doubt. Ela safik mamzer v'aser b'mamzeris. Rather, he's a possible mamzer, and therefore is forbidden to marry a mamzeris. Now, why do these guys have this machlokas? Well, I will just note one important point to know, and this is going to then lead into the discussion of why each one has his opinion. The first thing that you need to know is that the halacha is always like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. And so really what we're going to say is that what Abaye and Rava are arguing about is which opinion do we need to have with Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, because we say that that's the halacha. So the kamiflagi b'de Rabbi Eliezer. So what Abaye and Rava are arguing about is about this teaching of Rabbi Eliezer, because we have a Mishnah that is taught in Kedushin. D'tanan Rabbi Eliezer Omer vadan bevadan mutter. Vadan besveikan, usveikan bevadan, usveikan besveikan asur. When it comes to a vadai, meaning somebody who is definitely a mamzer, they can marry only somebody who is definitely a mamzer. But somebody who is definitely a mamzer is not able to marry a suffix one, and somebody who's a suffix one is not able to marry a vadai one. And the suffix, and even you can't have a suffix marrying a suffix, because it could be, right? Even though this child that we're not sure whether he's a child of, this child, the second child for Chaim and Rachel, who may be the second child for Chaim and Rachel, but he also may be a mamzer after where the first child is actually Reuven's child. Well, we don't know which it is. And so even if we were to find a daughter who was married, who had the same situation, so if this is a son and we have a daughter who's in the exact same situation, it could be that one of them is a mamzer and one of them is not. So you can't even have them marry each other. So again, all of these situations, all these other three situations, a vade with a suffix with a vade, and a suffix with a suffix, all three of them are prohibited. So the elu hein sveikan. And what are the uncertain ones? Shetuki v'asufi v'chuti. We have the shetuki and asufi and the chuti. And what are they? So we'll take a look in Rashi. So shetuki is shekore aviv v'imu mishtakto. That the reason that it sounds like sheket is that the mother is quieting the child anytime the child asks after his father, and that's because the mother doesn't know who the father is, and so as a result, we have to be concerned that the child is a mamzer. And asufi, what is an asufi? Rashi says shnei asaf min hashuk, that this is a foundling, a child that is found in the marketplace. And we have to be worried that maybe this child is not a valid birth, that this child is a mamzer, because we don't know who the father or the mother is. The kuti. And what about the kuti case? So the kuti case, the problem is the following with the kutim. The kutim were these Jews who did not believe in anything that wasn't in the Torah Shabbat that was not written in the Torah itself. And they did not agree with the rabbinic versions of the laws. Well, the problem is that the rabbis say that the Torah allows a marriage to take place through the giving of money or the writing of a shtar. And so as a result, they did not believe that marriage existed with money or a contract. Well, that's a big problem, because if Reuven gives money to Rachel in order to marry her, and now Rachel says, you know what, I don't want to marry you. According to the Kutim, she doesn't need a divorce. And so as a result, the Kutim would say, you want to now marry Shimon? Go ahead, marry Shimon. The problem is that according to the rabbis, now when Rachel marries Shimon without a get from Reuven, that child that's born is going to be a mamzer. So as a result, because of that uncertainty, we have to assume that all Kutim are Safek mamzerim. So Amarava, Ba'amarav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda said, Amarav halacha karebi, Karebi Elazar. Rav said that the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar. So Ki Amrisa Kamei de Shmuel Amrali. But then, so Rav Yehuda said that Rav said that the halacha was like Rabbi Elazar. But then when I said this to Shmuel, Shmuel told me Hillel Shana that Hillel. What did Hillel teach? Asara Yuchasan Alu B'mi Bavel. There were 10 different classes of Jews that went back to Eretz Yisrael from Bavel after when the second Beit HaMikdash was rebuilt. Kohanei, Leviye, V'Yisraelei. So you have the Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim. Cholalei, those are Kohanim that are not valid because, for example, a Kohen married a Gerusha, or the Kohen was the product of a marriage to a Gerusha, or the descendant of the marriage to the Gerusha. Geirei, converts. Charurei, freed slaves. Mamzerei, Nesine, Shasuke, Vasufe. You have the Mamzerim, the Nesinim, and the Shtukim, and the Asufim. All of these are various latter categories being uncertain mamzerim. And what did Hillel say? The kulan mutar and lavo zeh, and all of them are allowed to marry one another. Now, of course, Rashi immediately points out he doesn't mean this literally, that every one of these 10 categories is able to marry each of the other 10 categories, but they're all able to marry a bunch of the categories. So, for example, the Kohanim can marry the Leviim and Yisraelim. The Leviim and the Israelim can also marry the Chalolim and the converts and the freed slaves, etc. So the point is, Va'at Amrat halacha Rabbi Elazar, and you're going to say that the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar. So now we have these two different potential viewpoints. We have Rabbi Elazar's viewpoint that says that a Safek mamzer cannot marry a Vadai mamzer, and we have the Hillel's viewpoint where the last categories, the Mamzerim, Nesinim, Neshtukim, and Asufim, he says, are all able to marry one another. Well, that means that according to Hillel, you can have the uncertain Mamzerim marry the certain Mamzerim. So now we say the following. So now we understand the argument between Abaye and Rava. Abaye savar la k'Shmuel d'amar halacha k'Hillel, right? Abaye thought that like Shmuel, that the halacha is like Hillel, and therefore Umoki la Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov aliba de Hilchasa, and he wants to put Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, whom we said the halacha is always like him, we want to make him like Hillel, and so as a result, according to Abaye, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov is the one who says that the second child is not a possible mamzer. He's treated like a definite mamzer, and so he can marry a mamzeris. Of course, he's actually a Safek mamzer, but we say, according to Hillel, that a Safek mamzer is allowed to marry a definite mamzer. Whereas, because we don't want to have a contradiction between one halacha and another halacha. Because if in fact the halacha is like Hillel, and if in fact the halacha is like Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov, and they say different things, well, then we have a contradiction. Similarly, Rava Sabar Karav Karav, the Amar Halacha Rabbi Lezer. Rava felt like that the halacha was like Rav, who says that the halacha is like Rabbi Lezer. And what does Rabbi Lezer say? Umoki the Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov ali, but the hilchasa. And so again, he sets Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov according to the halacha. And what is Kiheki the low tixture, so that they're hilchasa, because he doesn't want to have, as we turn to Lamed Chedam Lamed Zion Bet, he doesn't want to have a contradiction between the two things. And so as a result, Rava, who says that the halacha is like Rebbe Lazar, says that maybe a suffix mamzer cannot marry a definite mamzer. And so as a result, Rabbi Eliezer is saying that the second child is not a definite mamzer as a result of doubt, and therefore is forbidden to marry an actual mamzer, a certain mamzer. Okay, so Amar Abaye, Mina Minallah. Look, I'm going to show you that I have a great source for my teaching that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov treats uncertainty like definite, that an uncertain mamzer should be treated like a definite mamzer. So to call a safika the Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov kivadei mishabile, that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov treats uncertainty like definite. Why? Did Tanya Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says the following: Harei sheba al nashim harbe. If you have a man who has had relationships with many women, ve'ein yodea al ezehu mehen ba, and he has no idea who they are or which of them had children, and he does not keep track of any of that. V'chein he shebo ala anashim harbe, or if a woman has relations with many men, and she has no idea which of them is the father of any of her children. So nimsa av no se espito. We can end up having a father marrying his daughter, v'ach no se esachosa, or a brother marrying his sister. V'nismalei kol ha'olam kula mamzerin, and all the world will be filled with mamzerin. V'al zem nemar umala haaretz zima, and the land is going to be filled with zima, with depravity. So even though obviously there's only uncertainty in this case, right? Because of course, neither the man nor the woman in what we're just described knows for sure whether they are engaging in incest. So it's only an uncertainty, but yet it's clear from the statement, according to Abaye, that we're treating a suffix mamzer like a vadai mamzer. And so as a result, it must be that Rabbi Eliezer allows a suffix mamzer to marry a vadai mamzer. Well, the Rava, Amar Lach, Rava would respond, no, that is not in fact what you should take away from it. Hachikamar, when we say that there's zima, that there's depravity, that it sounds like there's definite depravity. Zomahi, zima is an abbreviation for zomahi. This child, what is it? Is this child a mamzer or not a mamzer? Meaning that this child is a suffix, and as a result, it has to be treated as a separate category. So as a result, Rava says that no, that statement of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov does not prove anything. Okay, so Yeser al Kain Amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Now we have an additional statement of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Lo Yisa. So once having mentioned one statement, we're now going to mention another statement, and then that's going to lead us to discussing a very interesting practice that some rabbis used to have. Yeser al Kain Amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. More than this, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said, Lo Yisa Adam Isha b'Medina Zo, v'Yelech v'Yisa Isha b'Medina Acheres. You shouldn't have, if you are a commuter between two countries or two regions or two states, you should not have a wife in both locations, because Shema Yizdavgu Zelazeh, maybe the children will end up marrying each other. And you're going to find a brother marrying his sister. So now the Gemara asks, 1 second, we actually see that this practice of having wives in different locations was done. So Amy, is that really true that you can't do this? And of course, again, remember that we always say that the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So, v'harav ki ikla Dardashir machris v'amar. When Rav would come to Dardashir, the city of Dardashir, he would make the following announcements: Man havya layoma, who wants to marry me for the day? So v'Rav Nachman ki ikla l'shchansiv machris v'amar. And similarly, when Rav Nachman would come to Shchansiv, he would announce, Man havya layoma, who wants to marry me for the day? Well, doesn't that show that they had their wives at home, and then they married another wife in the city where they were visiting? Well, Shiny Rabbanan Difkiya Shemayhu. No, that's different, because these rabbis are sufficiently famous that everybody's going to know who their father is. So their children are going to know their father, and so not everybody's going to know. There's not going to be any confusion and concern about marrying a sibling. Well, one second. There is another problem that we have with this story, and it's not the ethics of the whole situation. The problem that we have is v'ha'amar Rava tiva'u linaseh nispaisa, that when you have a woman proposed to marry and she accepts the proposal, tzricha leishev shiva nikim, there is a requirement that she separate for 7 days. This is known as I just realized I didn't as dam chimud. We're on number 5 at the moment on the screen. So this is known as dam chimud. Dam chimud is the following presumption that women get so sexually aroused by the possibility of their getting married, and they are very excited about that possibility, that they effectively enter into their menstrual cycle as a result. And it may be that they only see a single drop of blood, and it could be that we don't even see the single drop of blood, but we're going to assume that they do. And as a result, we require that there be 7 days of separation, and that she makes sure that she has 7 clean days, so that way we can assume that she is no longer a nidah. And so the problem is that if these rabbis were coming to the town and only announcing when they got there that they were going to marry somebody, well, then as soon as that happened, the women would need to separate for 7 days. Well, what use would that be? So Rabbanan, so 2 answers. Rabbanan, answer number 1, Rabbanan shluchayhu havu mishadre umode lahu. So one answer is that the rabbis in these cases would send messengers and they would tell them ahead of time. So as a result, there would be the opportunity to wait those 7 days before they actually came to the city. And so as a result, when we said earlier that there was this announcement, Man Havya Layoma, he was saying, okay, who already agreed, is to be my wife for the night? Or you could say the following: L'Rabbanan Yehude Ba'almahu Demiyachte Lahu. That all they were seeking was just somebody with whom they could be in private. That they were not actually interested in having marital relations with these women. Da'amar mar, Eino dome misha yesh lo pas b'solo l'misha ein lo pas b'solo. Because there's a big difference between somebody who's got bread in their basket and somebody who does not have bread in their basket. Well, what in the world does that mean? Well, I'll give you the analogy that I like on this one, because frankly, it happens to me with every fast day, which is as soon as the fast is over, I am no longer hungry. And I don't know if that's true for you, but it's certainly true for me. And why is that the case? Because if I want to eat, I can go eat. And so as long as I can eat, suddenly it's not so urgent for me to eat any longer. And so that is the idea of bread in the basket. And so similarly, the idea here is that by being able to be in solitude with these women. They no longer have the desire and the need to actually engage in intercourse because they know that if they wanted to, they could. And so as a result, the same concept applies here as well. So Tana, now this teaching can be viewed in several different ways. Certainly, my initial reaction to it is it's telling us that this is not the right behavior, that we do not want men to come to town and say, who wants to be my wife for the day? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Amar, what else did Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov say? Lo yisa adam ishto v'dato legarsha. You should not marry somebody if you intend to divorce them. Mishum shenemar al tacharosh al re'acha ra'a v'hu yoshev levetach itach. Don't have a evil plan towards your friend when he's living with you. So he thinks that everything is fine and you're hatching a plot against him. That is not the way to behave. And so similarly, if you think you're going to divorce your wife, you should not engage in marital relations because that is not an appropriate action. And so similarly, this is suggesting that maybe this is not the way that people should behave. On the other hand, I will note that the Meiri highlights here that in fact, and probably, it's hard to imagine that the Gemara is really trying to take Rav and Rav Nachman to task, but rather what they're saying is, as long as you can't do it, as long as the person who you're marrying doesn't know. And so here it's clear that the people who are being married for the night know that that's the situation, that they're just being married for one night. So too, that is so that is okay. But what is not okay is to marry under the pretense of living with forever when you know that your plan is not to do so. Okay, so now we come to the final thing that we'll talk about today, and that is cases of inheritance. And we're going to deal with 8 different cases, but we're only going to deal with the first 3 cases today. The next 5 cases we'll deal with tomorrow. So let's get us started. And all the cases are going to deal with our situation where, now we're going to call the son Ben. Ben is the son who's uncertain about his father. Was his mother Rachel pregnant for 9 months, and therefore his father is really Reuven? Or was his mother Rachel pregnant for 7 months, and his father is Chaim, Reuven's brother? So, and now we're going to have questions about who gets to inherit what. So, Suffolk, the Yavam, if we have Ben and Chaim, the Yavam, Shabo L'cholok b'nichsei Mishnah, and they want to divide the estate of the dead brother, namely Reuven. So each of them are making a claim. Suffolk, Amar, the one who's uncertain, says, Ana bar misnahu, I'm actually Reuven's son, b'nichsei didehu, and all the inheritance belongs to me. The Yavam Amar, whereas Chaim says, At b'raydi diyat, you're my son. You don't have any claim in Reuven's estate because I am the next of kin. I get the estate. Well, havi mamon hamuto b'safek. So as a result, this money is money that is in doubt. There's no way to distinguish between the 2 claims. Umamon hamuto b'safek cholkin. Money that lays in doubt, it gets divided. So that's case number 1. Case number 2. That was a pretty straightforward one. Now we get a little more complicated. Safek uvnei yavam shabo l'cholok v'nechsei misna. Now it's not Ben and Chaim, but it's Ben and Chaim's children. Ben and Chaim's children are debating about the estate of Reuven. So Safek Amar Hahu Gavra Bar Misnahu, right? So that I am the son of Reuven. The next of the day, who and everything belongs to me. B'nei Yavam Amrei, no, atachinuat, you're our brother. Umanacha umanasa hu deislan lach bahadan, and your portion is all that you have with us. So Savar Rabbanan Kameder of Masharshia. So the rabbis thought in front of Rav Masharshia, what did they wanted to say? They wanted to say that the case is Masnisini. The case is like a Mishnah Ditnan, because we have a Mishnah that we'll learn on Kuf Amud Aleph and Kuf Amud Bet in this Masechet. Hu Einu Yorish Osam. Okay, let's back up and tell you the case of that Mishnah, because otherwise it gets very confusing. Now we're going to the Mishnah deals with a case where Ben is either Reuven's son or Shimon's son. Reuven and Shimon are not brothers, okay? But after Rachel was married to Reuven, so then Rachel married Shimon, and they got married too soon, and we're not sure whether Ben is Reuven's son or Rachel or Shimon's son. And Reuven and Shimon each have other sons. So now the question is, so what do we say about Ben? Poor Ben. Because what do we say? Who Einu Yorish Osam? He can't inherit any of his brothers. The Haim Yorshin Oso, but they can inherit him. Because what do they say? Right? Let's just go over what they say, and so we understand. Because the brothers who are the sons, Reuven's other sons, will tell Ben, look, prove that you're our brother, and then you'll collect with us. But until you prove that you're our brother, we think you're Chaim's son. We think you're Shimon's son. And Shimon's other sons will tell Ben the exact same thing. If you want to inherit with us, you need to prove that you are Shimon's son, because we think that you are a Reuven's son. So as a result, Ben is unable to inherit with either Reuven's sons or Shimon's sons. On the other hand, what happens with respect to if Ben now dies? Well, when Ben dies, so then both Reuven and Shimon's sons can effectively inherit, because all of them are in the same uncertain situation. There is no definite that is a claim. So again, where Ben is trying to claim either Reuven's estate or Shimon's estate, the problem is that Ben's claim is uncertain, whereas Reuven's sons and Shimon's sons, their other sons are definite. They do have a definite claim because they know that their father is either Reuven or Shimon, and so as a result, they get to definitely inherit. But so Ben cannot inherit with them. But when Ben dies, everybody is all of the same level. They're all uncertain relatives associated with Ben. And so as a result, they can all inherit him. So let's say that this case here, now we go back to our case where Ben is arguing about Reuven's estate with Chaim's children. And let's say that this is an opposite situation. So Hasam Amrile Iti Rayav Ushkol. There in the Mishnah, the brothers, the sons of Reuven and the sons of Shimon all say to Ben that you need to bring proof, and if you prove you're our brother, well then you can take with us. But Hacha Amar Lahu Aitu Raya Ushkolo. He could say to them, listen, I definitely get, because either I am Reuven's son, and so I get, or I am Chaim's son, and I get. So I am definitely a participant in the estate of Reuven. However, you are not definitely a participant in the estate of Reuven, because maybe I am Reuven's son, in which case you don't get anything. So Hacha Amar Lahu Aitu Raya Ushkolo. So again, here let Ben say to the other brothers, to Chaim's other children, bring me proof that you're my brothers, and then you can take. So Amar Lahu Rav Masharshia Midame. These cases are not really comparable. Hasam Inhu Vadai V'ihu Safek. In the case where you were talking about Reuven's children and Shimon's children, well then that situation, those definite children are definite heirs and definitely sure about how they inherit. But Ben in that case is uncertain. But Hachi Idi V'idi Safek. But really, in this case, Ben also is uncertain. It is not a case of definite and certain, because even Ben is uncertain. Does he inherit directly from Ruvain, or does he inherit through Chaim? It's not clear. So Ela'i Dam Yalamas Nisan. But if you want to say that there's a case that's comparable to the case on Kuf Amid Aleph and Kuf Amid Bet, Lahadamya. This is the case that it's comparable to. L'safek b'nei Yavam shebo l'chalak b'nichse Yavam gufei. Now let's instead say the following: Chaim's brothers are inheriting Chaim's estate, and Ben wants to participate in that because maybe he is Chaim's son. But Chaim's brothers can all say, "Dahasam Amrilei Aidiraya Danuchel Ad Shkol." So, because they can all say, the Chaim's actual sons can all say, "Bring proof that you're our brother, and then you can inherit with us." But until you bring the proof that you are definitely our brother, we don't need to share with you. And in fact, that is the halacha. And so now we've dealt with 3 cases. Again, the question that we have to ask is whose relationship is definite, whose relationship is uncertain, and the definite piece gets acknowledged, whereas the uncertain piece does not. And so only if you have 2 uncertainties, then what's left, you end up splitting. And so where you have a certainty, well, then that, so for example, if Ben, in case number 2, if Chaim had 2 other children, so Ben would get 1/3 of the estate based on being Chaim's son, and then Ben would get half of the rest because there's an uncertainty. Is he Ruvain's son and so inheriting directly, or is he Chaim's son and then inheriting indirectly? And so whereas Chaim's other sons would also get 1/3, and so they split up. So Ben ends up with 2/3, and Chaim's 2 other sons would end up splitting the 1/3, so they each get 1/6. So those are the halachas of the 3 different cases. So we have 2 cases, one case where they split because they both had uncertain claims. That's where Chaim and Ben are arguing about Ruvain's estate. And then we have another case where Ben has at least some greater claim than Chaim's children, and so as a result, it ends up getting a little extra. And then we have the case where Ben and Chaim's other sons are trying to divide Chaim's estate, where Ben ends up with nothing because Chaim's other children have a definite claim, whereas Ben's total claim is only uncertain. So that's dealt with 3 cases, and we'll deal with the other 5 cases, God willing, tomorrow.
What would be considered proof? A birth certificate?
Excellent question. So the practical answer, the interesting question is, do we consider DNA evidence to be sufficient proof? And I am not sure about that. I will do some checking to see whether DNA evidence is sufficient la halacha. When it comes to this, I would think so, but I'm not 100% sure. But the answer is that it effectively, when we make that statement, bring proof and then you'll inherit with us, it is on some level facetious, and it is saying you cannot do this, and therefore you will not inherit with us. But it's an excellent question of whether there is such a thing as sufficient
proof. Right.
Exactly.
Because I know in a lot of the other Gemara that we've studied over the years, a shtar would be proof, but I don't think a shtar would be necessary or is even applicable here.
Correct. You're absolutely right. There is no shtar as evidence here because ultimately, right, we're unsure about the facts and it's about physical facts, and so that a shtar is not going to be able to prove. A shtar can help us prove a date, can help us prove whether something.
Also for property, it could help. With
property, exactly, can prove a transaction happened, but it's very difficult for it to prove whether a child has a particular father or not. So that is much more complicated. But we'll look forward to talking about the other 5 cases, God willing, tomorrow.
Thank you. Have a good day, Rabbi.
Thank you so much. You have a good day also.
See you soon.